Superb. Well, I will just share my screen. So tell me when you can see my screen.
Yes.
Superb. So, well, ladies, thank you very much for the introduction and welcome. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ken Valledy, and over the next, I'll be talking for about 30 minutes or so, and then there's time for questions. But the subject of the talk today is how to understand the everyday language of startups. And I'll give you a bit of background about myself as to the context behind my interest in this area. So what I want to cover, this seems a lot, but I will go through it reasonably quickly, is first of all, a bit about me and what I do at Progressive, so the company I co-found at the moment. A bit about my own experience with the day one barrage of words that I got hit with when I jumped into the startup world, and there was a massive barrage of words. The importance of really embracing these words. It sounds obvious, but it's really important that you see it as a proactively see it as an opportunity. And then we're just going to some words that I believe you should know from day one. And then what I always say, words at the moment. So like most languages, the world of startups, the language of startups changes all the time. So, and then we finish with some questions. So what might be better, if it's okay with everyone, if you can, and this is a really urgent question, if you can hold your questions to the end or put something in chat, and I'm sure between us we can work through your questions. So first about myself, by trade I'm a marketing guy. So up until 9 years ago I was a brand marketeer, worked for a few large companies. Last company I worked at was AB InBev, Anheuser-Busch InBev, the large global brewer. I did a few brand director roles there. I then jumped the corporate ship 9 years ago, mainly because I met some startups in Shoreditch, and I thought, wow, these ladies actually, I thought they're amazing founders, really vibrant, really enthusiastic. And I just felt quite old and crusty, if I'm really honest. I thought, what am I doing in this corporate world? I need to work with people like this. They energize me. And also, they need to work with people I was working with at AB InBev. So initially, I tried to get the startups into AB InBev to work with brands like Budweiser and Beck's, etc. But it was very tough. One, I needed more time to do it. And two, there was a bit of a culture clash, if I'm honest, big company, small company, etc. So I decided in a moment of madness, inspiration, maybe a mixture of the two, to jump ship and initially on my own be that person in the middle. So connecting the corporate world with the startup world. Roll forward to where we are now. I co-found a company at Progressive, and we literally do that. So we work with clients such as P&G, Mercedes, GSK, DFS, the furniture retailer. These clients of ours will give us business challenges. It could be a marketing challenge, could be a recruitment challenge, a logistics challenge, etc. And we will go out and find startups or see what's out there in the startup world for them, and ultimately find them startups to work with. So I'm a bit like a connector, a Cupid, etc. And I've also co-written a book, which I will briefly cover as we go through the slides. So my word barrage from day one really was quite frightening, actually, because, sorry, before I go into that, missed the slide, sorry, the Progressive bit, as I said, we connect this and our clients, and I sit between the startup world and the corporate world. But my word barrage, I think from first week, I wrote down words I didn't understand. So I sat in meetings with startups, and it's like, what I hear people talking about roadmaps and EIS and SEIS and enterprise. I didn't know what enterprise was, even though I came from the corporate background. Cap tables, B2C, B2B2C, B2B2C. And I went away thinking, what the hell have I let myself in for? I know the corporate world had loads of terminology, and dare I say still has, but the startup world just has far too much terminology. And initially, if I'm really honest, I wondered what I'd done. So even though I'd had should we say, the courage, guts to jump the corporate ship and leave a steady job behind and work with startups, the first week, 2 weeks, 1 month, I felt a little bit uneasy because I felt a little bit of an outsider. I felt like I wasn't really up to speed, and I wondered what value I could add. And looking back now, it's just because of the words that were flying around. And I just thought, well, I don't know this. I don't feel part of it. People can see that I'm unaware of these words. So I initially thought years ago about putting a book together. And then, like most things, once business picked up and my life went on and the company got bigger, I'd forgotten about this book. But 2 years ago, I started thinking about it again. And then last year, I released a book called the Startup Lexicon. And this will be the only plug for the book in the presentation. But the Startup Lexicon, I wrote it with a chap called Eamon Kerry, who's in the picture with me here. Eamon used to head up Techstars in the UK. And we put together a book which has got 200 plus keywords, terms that are used by startups and investors. And we've also put 25 or so stories in from experts. So not only with some words do you get a definition, but you also get some context in the form of a story from an expert. So we created this book, came out last year, and we're already looking next month to start writing edition 2 because there's more words coming on. But obviously, I would say highly recommended you buy the book, but it's most likely the only book out there that pulls all these words and definitions together. End of plug. So the importance of understanding language. And as I say, it kind of really got me at the start. I think there's many, but 5 key factors, I think, why it's important. One, I think taking that first step and having that confidence to engage is crucial. And I know a lot of founders, especially if I'm honest, female founders, who say that when they go into the first meeting as a founder and they sit with investors or other people who have been there for some time and all these words are flying around, their imposter syndrome kicks in and they feel like, have I made the right step? And a lot of them will not carry on. So this, having the word knowledge in your bank and having an idea of the main words will help you feel comfortable in those initial meetings, because it's those initial meetings that will give you the confidence to go on. And I do believe in marginal gains. And I've seen a few times, and maybe I did it all those years ago, but you don't really understand the meaning of a word and you wing it and it's the wrong perception of a word. And being very British, people say, oh, fine, and they chat, but they think, oh, they didn't understand that word. So if someone asks you what your burn rate is, your roadmap is, etc., your LTV to CAC ratio, and you come out with an answer which shows that you really don't understand what they're asking, that could be the difference between maybe an investment going ahead or not, or at the very least, another meeting taking place. Because most people in the startup world, especially with investors, meet lots and lots of different people. And there's small little marginal things that make them decide whether they want to meet them again. So if you show a little bit of a misunderstanding of something, it could actually disproportionately hinder your progress. So I'd always say, and I did it at the start, I put my hand up and said, I don't understand exactly that word, can you explain? But that takes a lot of guts to say that. So people generally try and wing it. So it's best to understand the words at the start. However, in the book, we always say it's a primer understanding, because any of these words in this book, if you look at them, you'll get a definition, but you could read blogs, articles, and everything. There's things like down rounds, bridge rounds, seed rounds, everything. There's people who've written books about these things. So as long as you've got a prime understanding, a base understanding, I would say you can then go further with that base understanding and learn a bit more. So it's important to take that first step and try to understand the words in their most basic form. It also, with the book, has led to a lot of people come back. I'd say people who've been in the industry for a long time have actually come back to me and said, the scary thing is, Ken, I've looked at the book and I've just realized for the last 10 years, my view of what a definition was for that word was wrong. And people have kind of gone on with this definition and it's actually the wrong definition for the word. And we've all done that. So we've had a few quite established people come back and said, I always thought that meant that. And I've been leading conversations and answering questions based on my misunderstanding of the word. So it's always good to reassess words. So you might look at a book or you might think you know a word, but it's always good just to make sure that you have got the clear, correct understanding of it. And overall, whether you go through my book or you try and embrace the words off your own back, the consequences of not stepping forward and understanding these words could be, as I said earlier, could be quite big, and in a very negative way could actually really hinder your progress. So you don't want to avoid this language that you're going to kind of walk straight into, because you will walk straight into it. You want to be confident you understand the basics, and with confidence comes a confidence to say, I don't quite understand what you're asking there, can you explain? But you've got to make that first step and go out there and do your research and understand the language you're going to have to embrace going forward. So there's 5, 6 examples there of why you really need to understand the language. So we go into some of the words, and I'm not going to go through the whole book of 200 words because we'll be here all week, but I've just picked out some key words that I think you should know on day one. And we'll go through some of these in a second, but everything from angel investor, bootstrapping, burn rate, churn rate, deal flow, elevator pitch, MVP, POC, product market fit, all these things I would guarantee in any week when you're talking to people, 1, 2, 3 of these words will come up. And as you go through your journey, some of these words will come up more. So it's important you understand what they mean right from the go, and you're confident when you talk about your burn rate, you're confident when you talk about your churn rate, because you feel comfortable that you really understand what it means and what you're saying. So if we look at some of these are general ones that I come across all the time. So roadmap is, and again, I appreciate a lot of you know the definitions of these, so I'm not going to read each one word for word, but roadmap, the way I see it, is a document, or could be you describing what your company or product is going to do in the foreseeable future. Now, I deal with a lot of corporates, and they ask questions at the end of pitches. And I've noticed one trend in the last 12 months is that more corporates now, mainly because maybe they understand roadmap, are saying, what's your roadmap? So this question, I'd say 18 months, 2 years ago, never came up from corporates at all, my clients. But now, a kind of a very easy question for them to ask is, what is your roadmap? So it sounds obvious, but understand what they're asking for and answer the question showing you've got some ambition and understanding of where you want to take your company. And I've got in bold at the bottom there, Jim Edwards, who heads up innovation at Kimberly-Clark. He's written a really nice story in the book about his experience of roadmap and startups explaining their roadmap. Angel investor bootstrapping may be relevant for a lot of you on the call. Angel investor is generally high net worth individuals, another definition in the book. These are people that can help you start your business from day one. And these are generally people who could be friends, family, or within your network. Some of them join together and form angel syndicates. But these are people that are crucial in most cases to help a business start in terms of funding a business. So most of you, I'd imagine, will know angel investors, and if not, then you are aware of angel investors. You might work with, you might have some angel investment already, but it's a crucial journey. And I also think that this now is my own view. I think nowadays angel investors have got much more. There's more awareness around them. They've got much more prominence. People now talking about angel investment. I think before it was maybe a few years ago, it was deemed that's the small end. These are kind of people just dabbling at the start, but these people are absolutely crucial. So I think the perception of angel investors, I believe, has really gone up in a positive way over the last 5, 6, 7 years. On the other side, you've got bootstrapping. So this is where a company at the moment isn't taking funding from outside, and most of its funding is coming internally, either from people's own money or savings or from revenue, ideally. And Emma Jones, who heads up Enterprise Nation, she's written a really, really great story about bootstrapping in the book. And what she says is, again, bootstrapping now, I think, has got a much more positive shine on it maybe before. Before, it might have been deemed as you're really early days, you haven't thought about investment yet, you're trying to skimping and scraping. And to a certain extent, with some people, you're not worth chatting to just yet until you get into serious funding. But bootstrapping now, I think, shows a certain mindset. And Emma, in her story, says that she thinks the bootstrapping mindset should carry on throughout your journey. So if you do go to seed, Series A, Series B, you should still have a bootstrapping mindset, which is about how can you be very prudent over your money and make sure you spend your money in the right way. And then she calls that like a bootstrapping mindset, where you look at every single penny and think where you can skimp and scrape in a good way to make sure your business is very lean financially. Burn rate, run rate, both linked. So burn rate is literally expressed in terms of the amount of money you need each month to keep the business going. So including all your costs. And that is a crucial thing that you get asked, not so much by corporates, but obviously investors will look into that. But it's a big thing you should know. If you just kind of go, it's about this, that would just give all the wrong signals to the person, whoever it is who asked that question. And runway is literally how much time you believe you've got left based on your current funding situation and before you need to raise again. Two very heavily linked words, but be very clear on them, because if someone asks, you need to understand what they mean. But more importantly, come back with a very clear, succinct answer. This is a little bit of a conscientious one. Founder market fit, product market fit. There's lots of something / market fit definitions now. Founder market fit is generally where the person who started the business has got experience in that industry. So if someone now has been, like if I now, from a marketing background, if I had decided to leave AB InBev and build a beer-related marketing app, someone would say that's a founder market fit because he's been in the beer industry, he's been in the marketing world for 15 years or so in that area. I actually sometimes think a founder market fit is good, but I also think a founder market fit sometimes can be a little bit blinkered. I meet a lot of founders who come from perfect backgrounds, but sometimes think that because of that, they know all the answers. And when they go into the world of starting their own business, you've got to open your mind a bit more. So I think most times it's great, but sometimes I've seen perfect founder market fit not leading to the success that everyone believes it should achieve. Product market fit, personally, I think is more important, because that's where you're actually bringing out a product that meets a need or a requirement in the marketplace. If you don't do that, I'm not saying that is disaster, but it's going to be a very, very, very steep hill to climb to get any success with your venture. There has to be a need, a problem out there that you're looking to address. There has to be a gap that you're looking to fill. And there's a really good contribution by Connor Murphy in there about the importance of product market fit. Again, two related words, MVP, POC. MVP, minimal viable product, is where you have a very early stage version of your product and you're testing it out to get feedback from your users. So it's a really good thing to do. I think it was in the Lean Startup book, that's where it kicked off. And you send something out into market, you test it, and that invaluable feedback you're going to get from your customers helps you create that product and get it into the right format for a successful launch, more full-time launch going forward. And then proof might sit down, like I see quite a lot, your pitch to a corporate, they say it's fantastic, but really they're taking your word for it. You're going to say the product's good. You'll hope they see the benefit of working with you and using your product. But proof of concept is where you actually put it out there and you test it. So you could say like a pilot, and that's the crucial bit. You know, all the presentation slides in the world are fantastic, but until your product actually is in market, in this case with say a corporate partner, and works, that's the real acid test. So proof of concept is something especially corporates always look for, and is their kind of big decider before they decide to throw loads of money into a partnership with a startup. So there's some day one words. There was more, we can go through loads and loads of them, but I would argue that all of those words you should be very, very familiar with. And if not, just take another read of them, understand them, just so you at least, should we say, increase your understanding by 5–10%, because they will definitely be terms that will be used, and should we say, parts of questions you will be asked. So the second part of some words we're looking at is misunderstood words. These are words that people sometimes look at and think, I thought it meant that, it means this. I've never quite understood this word. And they never quite nail it. And these are terms that you might ask 5 people and you get 5 different definitions back from. So we're not going to go through all of them, but one I put my hand up to is agile. So everyone talks about agile, being very agile. I never realized, and I'm being very honest, until I co-wrote the book, what agile actually was. I didn't realize that agile was part of an actual established project management methodology going back to the start of the century. I just thought agile was being, you know, like a foot, working together with different teams, being very quick. But actually the agile methodology is a very established methodology. So when Mick Duran, ex-innovation at P&G, PepsiCo, etc., did a story for us, and he came back with that, I thought, oh my God, I didn't know it meant that. So when sometimes people talk about agile, they are referring to a set established methodology that goes around 12 principles. I didn't see that at all. So I'm not saying you're going to get caught out by that, but that's an example of one person here talking about agile, one person here talking about agile. One's got this methodology of 12 principles in their head, and the other one just thinks quick thinking, working together, very flexible and fluid. The other one, which is a big one, and people could write massive white papers on it, is convertible notes. That's the way I see it. Is a way of raising, getting some early stage or some funding, some, should we say, get some debt, should we say, get some funding from potentially an investor, but it's where the money is short term, and then the investor gets their money back in a better equity play when you raise your next round of funding. Everyone talks about notes, convertible notes, definitely worth reading in the book, and definitely worth Andrus. Did a really good explanation, quite a detailed explanation of what convertible notes are. But as you go through your funding journey, the subject of convertible notes as an option will come up. Maybe not day one, but it's worth knowing what that means. It's a very, people have different views about it, but it is a well-used way of actually raising money. One that I'd say of all the definitions in the book has for and against on both sides is sweat equity. So sweat equity, if you're not aware, is where someone will offer their time and expertise to help you in return for some shares, equity, some financial benefit in the future with your company. Now, if you look at it from the founder's perspective, sweat equity could be fantastic. You could get someone who comes in and they've got an amazing amount of experience and you're getting it technically for free. But where we've seen a lot of founders, and Howard in the book does a great story about this, a lot of founders will give away maybe too much equity for this free support. And sometimes, even if they don't give away too much equity, the support they get isn't that great because the person doing it isn't getting paid. So you sometimes feel founders, they've got this sweat equity deal going with people, which is great, but because the person's not getting paid, even if they got a potential gain, financial gain in the future, potentially, they don't feel like getting the full worth of their expertise. And if you go to the other side, someone offering sweat equity, I know a lot of people who offer sweat equity and will talk forever about how many deals they got going. And if all these companies exited, they're going to get millions, but the chances are a lot of that won't happen. So they kind of go into it thinking it's going to be a 6-figure sum, 7-figure sum every year when all these companies exit and go public or whatever, but it doesn't quite happen. So both sides see it in a very positive note, but because it's a future promise, sometimes it does disappoint. So there's a very good story from Howard in there, but sweat equity is something that's used quite a lot. And there's a definition that a lot of people ask us questions about. So finally, if we go into words of the moment, I did this presentation a year ago, and the words of the moment a year ago are no longer here now. They're still going, but they're not words of the moment anymore. It shows you how quickly things move. But if I had to pick 4 or 5 words of the moment, these are the ones, and there could be loads more, but for time-wise, here's 4: generative AI, ChatGPT-5, LLM, and QAAS. Again, I could do a whole story on words of the moment, but these will be terms that you see a lot more now in people's writings, blogs, white papers. So if we were to go roughly through each one, generative AI, I'm sure most of you understand what that is. It's an advanced form of AI where the thing I see from it is actually creating new content. So whether it's going back and come back with text or visuals or whatever, it's new content. It's the advanced form of machine learning, etc. Very, very impressive. Everyone's talking about it. Some people are embracing it. Some people are scared silly. Some people think it should be closed down, but it's definitely getting the press. So generative AI may be one of those terms that corporates or people you meet in the future may bring up, and they don't really understand it, but it's a nice one to throw in, just like machine learning was a few years ago. So it will be used quite a lot. So if you can show you've got an understanding of what it really means, and maybe you can help them, that might be a feather in your, or an extra string in your bow if you're trying to build a relationship with someone. ChatGPT-5, I mean, this is going 3, 4. The ChatGPT-5 they're talking about will actually be even more advanced than it is. So it will actually be able to take in more nuances and sarcasm and irony into the questions and the answers it provides. So it's actually getting more emotional, understanding what you're saying. So rather than trying to literally just kind of read the words, it's almost trying to put in more emotion and emotional understanding into the whole way that ChatGPT and other similar platforms are working. So we're getting to this stage soon, as everyone's always spoken about, where you're going to ask a question in any kind of format with humor, sarcasm, whatever, and what comes back is exactly what you want, because they understand actually the slant you're coming in from. So ChatGPT-5 is being talked about quite a lot at the moment. One that I wasn't aware of, if I'm honest, up until about a month or so back, was LLM. So this is large language model. This is, if you look at generative AI tools, they're built upon platforms such as large language models. And it's like when you say you want to buy a car and you see that car on the road all the time. Since I've been aware of this term, I'm seeing it everywhere in people's definitions and writings and references. So LLM is something just to be aware of, if not just to understand the basics of it. And again, it's always good if a client mentions something and you say, oh, that's LLM, it means this. And then finally, quantum as a service. So quantum computing, all this deep tech, hard tech, whatever, the long-term stuff, the really, really heavy stuff that's not going to return next week, next year. We're finding now you now get quantum as a service. So a bit like SaaS, you now get a quantum as a service. So more people now are providing potential clients or people who want to use quantum computing on an on-demand, cheaper financial relationship, rather than having to throw millions, if not billions, into a project. So there's a lot more companies now defining themselves as quantum as a service. So it gives people great, should we say, reason to actually start playing with quantum computing, but on a much more flexible, ongoing, cheaper offering than maybe governments are at the moment, throwing billions and billions into this kind of stuff, as in quantum computing. So QAAS is coming up a lot more now. And as I say, a few companies I'm now working with on some briefs now have QAAS on their front page of their website. So it's starting to appear. And then as before I sent this presentation off, I noticed there's a book for dummies now on LLM. So I'm not saying that means it's out there but someone's written a whole book on it. So I'm not suggesting for one moment, guys, you go out and read this book, but it just shows you the prominence of a word and how it's becoming much more crucial for what a lot of people are doing. So there's now actually a book for dummies on LLM. So there's 4 of what could be 20, 30 words at the moment. And as I say, if I did this presentation Oh, if I did this presentation in 6 months' time, there'd be some more words on here as well. But the conversation continues. So as I said earlier, these words evolve, things move on. If anyone has any time, that's myself and Eamon. We wrote we did the book, but we also did a podcast series called the Catalyst Podcast. If any of you got time, you can hear Eamon and I talk about some of these words, usually half an hour each episode. And some of those terms you'll know, some you won't. Eamon brings a real investor angle to it, which is really interesting, especially about things to do with down rounds. And we had quite a discussion on that. Is it a good or bad thing? So if you want to kind of hear some audio of people talking about words, if you really have the time to do that, then this is quite a good podcast to listen to. And finally, I'll leave you with a lovely quote, a lady called Meta Ray Brown, who said, language is the roadmap of a culture. It tells you where its people come from and where they are going. And I do believe that the language of startups is a really good reflection of what startups are about. I do think it's good to, in a way, to have your own language. And I think some of the words are very dynamic. They're very fresh. They're not kind of, dare I say, an accountancy lexicon or anything. A lot of these words have some vibrancy about them. So going back to my initial point, it's really good to embrace these words and at the very least understand their basic meaning. And then if needed, if you understand the basics, you can then delve deeper as and when needed. So that's me talking for some time there. So I'll stop there. I'm conscious I've been doing all the talking, but has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask? Did that help, or is that just one big load of waffle about A to Z of words for startups? Or
I'll just jump in really quick, just because this is session 1. So if you do have a question, there is in the reactions at the bottom of your screen, you can raise your hand just so everyone doesn't unmute themselves at the same time and start talking. So use the raise hand emoji to ask a question live, or you can also post a question in the chat and Em and myself can ask it on your behalf if you're in a particularly loud space or something like that. So yeah, raise your hand if you've got any questions about any of the terminology, any other questions for Ken. I'll start whilst we're waiting. How did you come up with the name of the book?
The name. Well, if anyone ever is thinking about writing a book, like most things, it's like starting a company. The hardest thing is a name. And I'm showing my age now, but there was an album out years ago by a band called ABC called The Lexicon of Love. It's quite a well-known album, and it wasn't that I was playing that and I thought lexicon, but I was looking for another word to do with language. And you go into thesaurus and it says all these things. Then lexicon came up. I thought, that was an album. I didn't even realize when I bought the album all those years ago, lexicon meant language. But lexicon is another word for language. So it was a perfect word for language rather than just say the startup language. But also because I'd got this kind of memory of the album, it just felt right. So the startup lexicon is a reference to an old LP that I used to play a lot. But also I thought it was a really new word in a way to describe language.
I'd never heard.
That was it, really. There you go.
It's memorable. I'm really sorry if I pronounce your name wrong, but Andrzej?
Yeah, Andrzej, but Andrew is okay. So can you define for me what is traction? Obviously, I think I have a vague idea, but so what's the definition? Traction.
Traction. To get traction. Well, that word's not in the book, but I would say so in a context of to get traction with someone or to get traction with a project. What's the context of the word? Is this a word you've heard and you're
struggling with multiple investors, they always say, come back when you have traction.
Okay, I would say, and Purdy, ladies jump in that's a good question. I've been asked that before. I would say traction is actually something tangible. You've moved from the kind of theory to the physical, the tangible, and you've got some results. So if you've got traction, I would take that as you've gone past step 1, you've maybe done a proof of concept, or you've got some good feedback from someone, or you've got some results. That was what I would see initially hearing that as traction. So it's almost like tangible, positive evidence. And and someone's saying here, generating reviews and things like that in the chat. It's actually going from, I would say, this is what I can do, and here it is on slides, to I'm actually doing this. So it's either growing revenue, building relationships, doing pilots. That's traction.
We'll be talking about it more throughout the week when we're talking about slides and what you need to do. But in its simplest form, the way that we would describe it is that you're proving that you're building something that your customers will love and will use.
Okay.
So at the very earliest stage, that might be that you've got a wait list of customers who want to use your product, but the product isn't launched yet. And obviously, as you progress through, you'll be getting revenues and repeat custom and referrals, and customers that love your product so much that they're recommending it to other people. But what we want to see at the very earliest stages is, have you spoken to your potential user? Have they demonstrated that they would love and would use your product? And it's all about, not the fact that they would just use it once, but how can you prove that they will keep using it and endorse it? And that's what investors want to see, because that's when they're going to make money.
Maybe that should go in the book.
But also it's subjective. Different people mean different things, which is the problem with investors talking about traction. They might want to see something different. And also this will come up as well, I'm sure. But investors saying come back when you have more traction might just be a different way of saying no. We can talk more again about why investors might not tell you no, why they might just say come back when you have more traction. It's all about relationships and what investors need from the startup ecosystem. And maybe you can add something.
I was just going to say, I was just going to take a question from the chat. Unless, do we have anything else to add on this one? It's a meaty topic.
Okay.
Okay. Question from Juan. 2 questions. First one was, what should we do if we find ourselves in a situation where we're unfamiliar with a term? How can we handle it gracefully, especially when we're with investors? And second, do we have access to this presentation? For the first one, I'll just say that is why we have this program and why we have the first day dedicated just to terminology. You'll also be getting a startup guide later on, which is going to list out more of these terms. While the phrase is true, there's no such thing as stupid questions. You want to make sure you do your research before, and you don't want to give investors any reason to say no. So like terms like MRR, ARR, again, that will all be covered this week. And a lot of that we've already talked about. You don't want the investor to get any red flags right off the bat. But Ken, I'll hand that over to you. And then also for the second part of Juan's question, do we have access to this presentation afterwards? Are you going to be sharing this afterwards?
Yeah, Purdy's got a copy, so we're more than happy to share it.
Great. And what do you think about the first part?
It's a really good question. I think, one, do your research. So, whatever way it is, be it from the book or research, whatever, understand some of the basic terms. And then being prepared is always the first thing. But you're always going to get a question in whatever you're doing that you don't quite understand. And I think you have a difficult decision there. You either kind of think you can wing it because you think you understand it, and it's always quite good if you can show an understanding of something. But if you really don't understand a term, then I would just be very honest with someone. Doesn't matter if it's to do with startups, whatever, it's generally in life, just say, can you just don't quite understand what you're asking for there. I've not heard of that before. So if you don't do research, you'll know most of the basic terms. But there are always things people throw in. And don't forget, people have their own words as well from their own investor backgrounds that you're not expected to know. So they might come out with something that all their peers know in the office, but they forget you won't know that. So it's best to ask exactly, to just explain what exactly you're looking for there with that. That's a nice way of trying to say, I don't really quite get, we want to let them try and explain it in words that hopefully make sense. But I always say, if in doubt, be honest. Because if you don't, and someone says, can you tell me your XYT over 6 and send me the number, and you've got no idea what they're talking about, but you go, yeah, no problem. You then still got the problem when you finish the meeting of what the hell they're asking for. Then you've got to drop them an email saying, that question, what do you exactly mean? That looks even worse. So I would say, if it comes to it, research it. But if you do get asked a question, you don't know what the term means or the answer, be honest. I've actually seen 2 or 3 founders get business because someone said, have you got any experience in this area? Slightly different here, but rather than the founder, twisting things a bit as if they've got experience in an area, just turning around and saying, no, we have no experience in that area at all. And they got the business. And the feedback from the corporate is, I really appreciate their honesty. So sometimes people ask you questions to catch you out. And if you're honest, and say, I don't quite understand it, that does work in your favor. So I'm not saying always say you don't understand things, do your research, but I always think, if in doubt, ask the question why they're there.
I love that line you said. What was it? what are you trying to get out of this? Or like, what's the purpose of the question?
Yes. Something I mean, I was in a meeting the other day where someone asked me a question. I thought I should know what this means. It wasn't nothing to do with startups. I just said, could you just you know, I think my words were something like, you know, so what exactly are you asking for there? Can you just kind of, you know, sort of get my head around what you're asking for? And it was almost a way of, can you just kind of break down what you're asking back layman's terms without saying, I don't understand. But I knew that if I didn't ask it in that meeting, I'd have an action to give an answer to it in a following email. And I've got to get back to someone and say, I don't know what they're asking for. And I'd rather do it there and then than try and word an email like, oh, I didn't quite hear you, or what was it again? And I always think if someone explains it, you can jump in a bit and get clarity rather than emails all the time, because they can get misinterpreted. So yeah, if in doubt, it doesn't happen often, but just say, I don't quite understand what you're asking. Just explain, or can you just explain exactly what you're looking for there? Is a nice way of not looking stupid if that's what you're worried about.
Love it. And worst case scenario too, you can always just sneak in a quick little Google search as well.
Yeah, if it's a kind of rapidly going questions and someone asks you something, write it down, and then while your colleagues with you asking something else, have a quick look and think, okay, you mentioned before about that. In my opinion, you're looking for this based on what you just read on your phone, whatever. So that can be a good way as well.
I think the same advice goes for if you understand what the question is, but you don't have the answer to hand. So if someone asks you something and you don't have the answer, obviously be well researched in the same way ahead of the conversation that you're having, but just say, I'll come back to you with the answer. Don't just make it up or guess or something, because having integrity is very important to investors and they'd rather build a relationship based on trust.
And the other quick thing on that, which is really interesting, is if someone asks you a question and you haven't quite got the answer, or you need to think about the answer, and you'll say you get back to them, that is another viable reason to make another connection with them post that meeting. Because the hardest thing, whatever meeting you have, is getting that follow-on meeting. So if you've got a good reason to connect with that person again post that meeting, so if you had a good meeting with them and you've got a reason to get back to them again with another answer, that's helping that relationship move on in a positive way.
Ramiro, should we jump to you?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thanks, Purdy and Em, for hosting this. Thank you, Ken, for your presentation. I'm the co-founder of EditMe, and I have a similar experience because I've transitioned from corporate to founding a startup, and actually translating it's not as straightforward as I thought it would be. So really valuable this presentation. Thank you. My first question was actually the one that you just answered, and my takeaway is that it's going to be real like a personal style. How do you specifically like to handle these sort of situations? But I love that feedback on, can I come back to you later on that one? I think it's always a nice way. I think you can even take advantage of kind of stressful situation to get to the next conversation or to the next whatever.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. Second question is really practical. Is you have a book, it's 200 words, it's a lot of pages. And is there any hack to it? I mean, have you published any kind of summary or an easier way just
so getting it's I mean, it's not that thick. I don't know, you can see on the screen. So it's very short definition. I'm sorry, I'm not being a book. It's very short definitions. So it's quite a reasonably thin book. But if it is too heavy, then it is on Amazon on Kindle and things such as that. So you can get a digital version of it if needed. But we try to keep it quite thin because they're just literally one paragraph definitions with a few stories. If not, it would be like a dictionary, which would be very dry and might help people sleep at night if they read it. But we need something a bit more, should we say, fast moving and a bit more catchy than a big dictionary. But no, and I think the other thing to say about just going back, another learning is that when you do get back to someone the next day, if you get back to them quite prompt the next day, their perception of you will be well organized as well. So I met them, they were going to get back to me on these two things. Next day, they got back on those two things. Already subconsciously, they think slick, well organized individual, when really it all came about from you asking a question you didn't have the answer to. Them asking a question you didn't have the answer to. A potential negative situation has turned into a positive.
100% agree. I was just going to mention, I've got Ken's book, and the way that I do it is I just flick from backwards to forwards and just look at some of the words, and then anything that I just want to read up a story or something that I want to make sure that my understanding is the same, I just read it rather than going kind of like beginning to end.
Yeah, we were asked to do an audio version, but no one wants to listen to a accelerator, and so it is a reference book rather than a chapter 1 to 10 book.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Daniel.
All right, Daniel.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Ken, thank you. Great presentation. And yeah, similar to yourself, I done the whole corporate to startup transition. I thought there was a lot of acronyms in the previous world, so here we are. Look, you know, I have my own view on what these terms mean, but keen to get your views. You know, how would you distinguish between B2B2C and B2C?
I would say, and again, interpretation, I would say B2B2C is a lot of things we do. So we have startups who work with corporates who are working directly with customers. So someone doing some work maybe for Braun, a shaver, and Braun's clients are the customer. So they're going B2B2C. So really it's a B2B startup, but it's B2B2C. It's getting through to, it's a customer need, but it's going by a corporate or a business. That's how I see it. B2C is usually direct. So I was mentoring a company the other day who literally built an app which is going straight out to customers, and they do their own marketing for it to try and build up unique users. So B2C is more direct to consumer, and B2B2C is a bit more a longer version of that, going via a corporate. I think there's now even an additional one now, B2B to whatever. It goes on forever and a day, but at the end of the day, it's just kind of your route to market really. And some people want to partner with a corporate, so it's more of a B2B play, but there's a to C bit at the end, because that's the end experiences with the customer, or it's built for a customer in mind at the end. Or the old B2C, B2B is the more truncated version. But yeah, so it's quite straightforward. I think it's quite straightforward. It's just a case of, I think I wouldn't worry too much on what abbreviation you use, but it's just the B2B2C is just a little bit more of a longer version to get to the same place, but it's usually via a business or corporate.
Yeah, that
makes sense.
Yeah, and just out of interest, I mean, how would you classify Uber? Would you classify Uber as B2B2C or B2C?
Uber as a company, a good one. I could be both, maybe. I don't know. I'd say it could be, depends. I mean, they're doing so many things now, I lose track of what they're doing as a business, but I would say in itself, I'd say it's more B2C, its origins, but I know all the other stuff they're doing now might be B2B2C in some ways. Cool. But from day one, yeah, that's a good question. There's
a lot of companies that have gone through our cohorts that start off with a B2C model, and they're trying to sell to consumers. And investors aren't as, they don't find that as popular. So investors tend to like investing in B2B because obviously you can sell to 10 companies where you might need to sell to 1,000 consumers. So it's just a lot harder work to get that saturation in a consumer market. So there's a lot of companies who start with a B2C product, and then they think, in order to get to that amount of people, if I build a relationship with one business, I can then get to all of their customers.
We've done a similar thing. You know, we were working with freelance trainers originally, but now we've pivoted to working with gyms, so the sort of B2B model for that scale. So yeah, it makes complete sense.
I mean, there's an app called Peppy, which is helps people with lots of well-being advice, etc. They're huge now, and they're B2B2C, but initially they were B2C, and for the exact reasons that Purdy said, the amount of money they needed to get any traction, going back to that word, took a lot of time, money, and effort, and they just found it easy to go via a corporate bridge partner in the middle. Good question.
All right. Do we have any final questions? Okay. If not, Ken, where is the best place for people to find you?
Yeah, if you go on LinkedIn, Ken Valledy on LinkedIn, so Valledy. I'm more than happy to continue any conversations going forward. If you've got any questions, connect up on LinkedIn and message me. And yeah, that's the best place. I'm on Twitter, but it's more under progressive, if I'm honest. So as a person, I would say LinkedIn is the place to go.
Awesome, thank you. We'll link your LinkedIn details in the follow-up with in the cohort. So founders, stick on, but we'll wave goodbye to you, Ken, and we'll probably stop the recording here as well.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you guys. Have a good
Thanks,
week.
Ken.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.